Hello and welcome to Challenges and Icons, and today I'm talking to David Butler, Vice President of Innovation for one of the world's most iconic brands, Coca Cola. After taking a graphic design class in high school, David instantly knew he wanted to be a designer. He went on to major in mass communications in college, but he also studied economics, media, art, sociology, and even meteorology. And it's a mix that he said introduced him to holistic systems thinking and problem solving. Well, on joining Coca Cola as Vice President of Global Design in 2004, David was quoted as saying Coca Cola knew they had a business problem, but they just didn't know they had a design problem. And it was through design and under David's supervision that Coca Cola revived their iconic status with a much more simpler, powerful, recognizable brand identity and design aesthetic for which we know the brand today. Well, today as Vice President of Innovation now, it's David's role to create the systems and processes necessary for Coca Cola to produce as much value as possible through innovation. And in this role, he's actually on a mission to discover 100,000 entrepreneurs around the world and partner them with the organizations and the systems and the communities and resources they need most to achieve their objectives. Well, he's also a self-proclaimed systems geek, he's a surfer, and he's also a natural optimist, and he's a very busy man, which is why he joins us today live on the telephone from Atlanta. And David, I wanted to say thank you very much for joining us today on Challenges and Icons.
Thanks, Jonathan. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's great to have you here also. I just wanted to start off by talking about you and your role. You were promoted from your role of Vice President Global Design to Vice President of Innovation in January 2012. Well, that's nearly 2 years in now. How are you managing your professional change of role from the linear world of design to the ever-broadening world of innovation?
Yeah, you know what? The way I think about it is it's all design. When I started at Coke, the focus was really around designing packaging and equipment, machines, retail experiences and so forth. But now, we're still designing new things. It just turns out to be more in the sort of space of business models. So it's all about design.
Okay, so when you talk about your personal definition of an innovation philosophy, you are coming from a design-centric point of view. Is there a deeper definition towards innovation that you might be thinking about?
Yeah, Jonathan, that word innovation is sometimes a trap. I mean, you can get lost in that word and spend a lot of time, a lot of, email flow, a lot of PowerPoint presentations, a lot of meetings just discussing that, the concept of innovation. So for me, we try to cut through all that here at Coke and just connect innovation to growth. And that makes it much clearer and simpler, frankly. So again, the way we think about innovation is in terms of growth. How much, if we launch this thing, if we do this thing, how much growth will it create? And again, you can kind of cut through a lot of clutter just by thinking about innovation in terms of growth.
Yes, indeed. Cutting through the clutter is something that I see badly done in many corporations around the world. But also in some that it's where it's done extremely well, and usually where there is a vision from the top or in a leadership position. But talking about corporations, at a corporate level, what do you see as the biggest challenges to innovation now that Coke is faced with a more prolific and dynamic competitive set than ever before?
Yeah, really two things, agility and scale. If you read any kind of news feed these days, you see another story about a big brand, a big company that is struggling with agility. More recently, BlackBerry is back in the news, and BlackBerry 4 years ago they had a huge market share, maybe 50% market share in the whole smartphone space or at least mobile phone space. Now today they're struggling to stay alive, and unfortunately this is the case. This is what every company, every brand, especially every big brand is facing these days. So every company is faced with coming up with a new way to stay agile and much more agile than ever before. On the flip side of that, I spend a lot of time with the startup community, global startup community, and every startup struggles with scale. So, these two things, agility and scale, are the two things that are facing every company, big or small, these days.
Indeed, agility and scale. And I've been reading recently about the woeful demise of Kodak.
I guess it's another good example of a brand that had scale, but that really just didn't use its agility and probably skills in innovation to work its way forward. And I guess it's a salient reminder for corporations that don't use the power that they have to be, as you say, agile. I think at a corporate level, we can see huge wastes waste of resources as well. There's something I've been talking a lot about recently, which is the great corporate innovation swindle, which means that there are billions spent on research around the world, but for various reasons, and sometimes it's just simply a fear of change at a corporate level, the fear of risk, failure, IP laws, and even the shareholder structure of stock-listed companies, that these innovations rarely see the light of day. What do you think about this in the position that you're in?
Yeah, Jonathan, number one, like we just said, the world is much more complex than ever before, or at least we can see the complexity better than ever before. So, launching something new, especially, globally, especially through a global, multinational company, is much more complex than ever before. So that's just part of life. That's just how it is these days. But one thing we've learned, so about a year ago, we stepped back and really looked at the whole startup community, lean startup, agile development, the way that a couple of founders can launch and create $1 billion brand in just a couple of years, and really learned a lot. So, one thing that we learned is that starting lean is key. So starting lean, I think, for us anyway, is critical to the future. So number one, there's much more complexity than ever before, but starting lean is really where is sort of the shift for us.
I couldn't agree more. Some of the best innovations that I've ever seen have come from environments which are deprived of resources, actually. And I'm not just talking about corporations or companies with lean resources. I'm actually thinking about communities around the world where I've seen incredible resourcefulness. You just need to look at the slums in India or Africa to see some of the most incredible inventive use of things that we would consider to be garbage and literally trash. So I guess it's the same principle that you're taking into the way that Coca-Cola is thinking about things, which is to start lean and be resourceful and agile. That, in a way, is what's keeping the innovation of Coca-Cola fresh. I wanted to also ask you about the difference between fundamental market-changing innovation and the daily creative campaigns that brands employ to keep market awareness alive. What are your thoughts on the difference between the fundamental innovation and daily creative campaigns?
Yeah, Jonathan, every company needs both. It doesn't matter if you're a startup, wherever, Nairobi, or if you're a big multinational in New York. Every company needs both types of innovation. But it all comes down to, again, this notion of connecting innovation to growth. Some things create incremental growth. They keep the lights on, the day-to-day sort of, optimization, incremental growth. And then other things create exponential growth, big, fast growth, big, whatever you want to call it, game-changing, transformational things in the market. But every company needs both types, and that's really the challenge. How do you do both at the same time? Okay,
so where do you feel today's best sources of innovation are coming from? Do you have a view on where they could come from in the future?
Yeah, no doubt. It's been very well documented, but business model innovation is the future, and that's no matter how you think about it, I think there's, anyone would agree that, the only way to create exponential growth, this sort of big, fast growth, Instagram kind of growth, is through business model innovation. And that's where, frankly, big companies struggle. Think about Coca Cola, over 100-year-old company. We developed a business model that is working, has worked for 100 years, over 100 years ago. So to sort of come into that space and start developing new business models is, can be quite challenging, especially, with, we're in 207 countries, huge footprint, with stakeholders around the world. So developing new, fresh thinking, especially in the space of business model innovation, can be difficult.
Okay, so returning to a theme that we've touched on already, and in fact you just mentioned it already, technology. The digital world is really just having a huge impact on innovation. How is it impacting on you directly, and where do you think technology can take us and brands in the future?
Yeah, well, this isn't anything new, but with what most people call the Internet of Things, basically when everything is connected to everything, I think that'll create a much more transparent and, hopefully collaborative world. I think, again, what many people call the Web 3.0, sort of the next place the web is going. That world will be much different than the world that we live in today. I think the whole concept of global brands could change, for instance. Turn over your phone and look on the back. It says, most likely it says, designed by Apple, assembled in China. Soon with ubiquitous broadband, everything being connected to everything else, 3D printers being very common, anyone will be able to do that. You could design something new, upload it, print it, and assemble your thing, whatever that thing is, your product, all over the world. And we haven't been able to do that in the past. And obviously this is exciting, challenging, all that at the same time.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. It's a kind of a new digital manufacturing age. And as you say, we're on the cusp of that already. It's beginning to happen. I think that the next 10 to 15 years are going to be seismic in terms of the way that people think about brands and engage with products. And we're just seeing the tip of the iceberg on that. In fact, one of my recent guests was talking about how in the future he could imagine that his product would be simply 3D printed when his customers wanted to get a new one. And I think that's an indication there of what you're talking about at a mass level. It's hugely exciting and creative times for everybody involved and challenging also. So lastly, I just wanted to finish on a couple of questions. Social responsibility and sustainable innovation are high on everyone's agenda at the moment. What are your views and your approach on this? And maybe what else needs to be looked at in terms of innovation?
Yeah, I think when we talk about sustainability, we're really talking about shared value. And again, that's not a new concept, but shared value, creating value for not only us, in our case as a company, but also the communities where we operate. And again, we operate in 207 countries. There are only 209 countries in the world on the planet, so that's a big footprint. So this again is not a new idea; it's just reality. This is how just the conditions for operating in today's world. So, but as I'm sure you know, you can't. This is not a PR thing. You have to design this from the beginning with whatever you're doing. And for any company, it has to be woven into the fabric of the company. You can't just talk about it or tell a story. It has to actually be a part of how you operate. So that's how we think about sustainability.
Okay, so basically what you're saying, be it rather than talk about it and have it integrated into the core of your very being and everything that you're doing.
Exactly, and it's very easy to say that, just be it rather than talk about it. And it's very easy to say it. But actually instilling that into the processes and the systems and the subsystems inside the corporation is quite difficult. So, but again, that's today's world. That's how you have to operate.
So it would be great if we could just finish on a vision for the future for the people that are listening in. They tend to be creative. They tend to come from the marketing community around the world. And this is a great opportunity for the listeners to hear David Butler's vision for the future of innovation. So tell us, how do you see it?
Yeah, Jonathan, really one thing, jobs. And I know that may sound mundane, but I think if we can bring innovation out of the abstract, out into the open, we can connect it to tangible growth, because we all need growth, and everybody needs growth. Small companies, big companies, developing economies, developed economies. My family, your family, we all need growth. And I think that innovation is really just about growth, and all that can connect very tangibly to what we do, the way we work. Frankly, jobs.
And that's a very positive and optimistic way to end this interview, David. I think this idea of innovation linked to growth, which equals jobs, and the social responsibility that comes with that is really huge, and it's a real, I think, inspirational model for other companies and corporations around the world of all sizes to take note of, and I think that it also demonstrates kind of in your role that the power that creative thinking can bring to businesses in a very positive way. So really, it's been a pleasure having you as part of our podcast today, David. I hope you found it useful, and we look forward to seeing the growth that you bring to Coca Cola, and in fact, as you said, to the lives of people around the world. Many thanks, and we look forward to seeing you soon.
Thanks, Jonathan. It's a pleasure. Thank you.